Welcome, Greek U Nation, to episode number 171 of the Fraternity Foodie Podcast. I am your host, Mike Ayalon, CEO of Greek University. I am a speaker and author of the book From Letters to Leaders, Creating Impact on Your College Campus and Beyond. We call these episodes the Fraternity Foodie Podcast because there is nothing like great food to bring fraternity and sorority leaders together. Fun fact, I landed in Philadelphia this week. I posted on Facebook that I was in town speaking at 3 local universities, and fraternity brothers immediately set up a dinner in Philadelphia for me to attend. So for all the college students that are listening right now, wondering if this is really a lifetime decision, I can tell you with 100% certainty that brotherhood is truly for life. During almost 2 decades of in-house corporate HR and staffing firm experience, our next guest, Scott Singer, brought his knowledge, skills, and talents to national and international corporations in a diverse range of industries. Now, as founder and president of Insider Career Strategies LLC, Scott regularly guides individual and corporate clients through the job search and hiring process, consulting on everything from resume writing and interview coaching to staffing programs and recruitment strategies. Scott brings unique insight into what employers want and, most importantly, need when it comes to staffing solutions, drawing on his time with major corporations such as Motorola, Ryder, Bacardi, Burger King, and LVMH. Real-world experience and depth of knowledge allow him to act as a true business partner to corporate clients, saving them both time and money via smart staffing and HR decisions. For job seekers, his straightforward advice and understanding of the other side provides a direct path towards career growth and success. Welcome to the show, Scott.
Thank you, Michael. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course. I'm so excited about this interview. I've been thinking about it all week long. I mean, what you talk about is just so important to our listeners. Gen Z is laser focused on their careers and jobs. So I know you have so much expertise to share with our audience. So I'm just grateful that you're here.
Thank you.
Now, you decided on Boston University for your undergraduate experience, which is a fantastic institution. Why BU?
BU was just, I was living in New Jersey at the time. BU, I had a lot of family from the Boston area. The city campus connected with me, and it just seemed like a great place to go, and had a good time there.
Yeah, it's a great city. That's really one of my favorite cities. I mean, talk about a great walkable city. That is the one for you. And you also joined Sigma Phi Epsilon there. What was so special about the Brothers of Sig Ep that made you want to join?
Yeah, and I'm sure you know this by seeing all the different chapters and different, fraternities and sororities that you've worked with. Each chapter has its own personality. And what I really liked about Sig Ep when I was rushing was that it had the chapter had an incredible amount of diversity. It was a very diverse chapter, a lot of ethnicities, a lot of religions, a lot of backgrounds. And, it was just a very nice, well-grounded organization. It was still a relatively young chapter. I think they'd been around, rechartered about 4 years or so when I had joined. And it was a really nice experience.
Yeah, your chapter sounds an awful lot like mine. I have so much respect for Sig Ep nationally. I mean, their Balanced Man program is just absolutely incredible. It really is. I think, the standard. I mean, everybody else is trying to reach that goal, and they've done it. And so a lot of respect to Sig Ep and their brothers across the country. Just an incredible program. After earning your MBA, you took your first recruiting job in 1996. You were working for an engineering and technology staffing agency, and you stayed in this field ever since. So I'm wondering, why are you so passionate about recruiting, staffing, and careers?
Yeah. I'm starting to feel old based on the dates. I did recruiting for about 19 years. I've been doing my consulting now for about 6 years. I made the shift, obviously. I moved from more of the employer side to now I focus more on the employee side. And I still do work with corporate. I mean, I work with some on, helping them on their strategy, helping on outplacement. But what I really like about it is, there's always, careers are very personal. Everybody has their own interest and their own orientation and their ability to contribute and to grow and develop. And by doing that, I've been able to help with that. And, initially from doing the recruitment side, it was helping people realize the job that they wanted to get. Part of the reason I don't do it quite so much, I don't do the recruitment anymore is, I'm sure you've seen this, and I'm sure you heard a lot about this. It's become very systems driven. People apply online. It's become a much more complicated process. It's become more data driven, and there's nothing wrong with that, but it wasn't where my passion was anymore. So, now I work largely with individuals in terms of helping them prepare and how to navigate that situation and how to be their best selves in the job market.
Well, you're in the right place then, because everybody who's listening is thinking exactly about, your focus. College students, they want to talk about getting jobs. I mean, that's really for them just front of mind. So how can college students, or maybe even some of the new graduates, nail that dreaded elevator pitch with a potential employer?
Yeah, great question. For those who don't know, the elevator pitch, it's called that because let's say you get the CEO in an elevator for a minute or two, you've got to basically make your case. Here's me, let's talk. And what typically every interview, whether it's a phone screen or a full-fledged interview, they usually start with the question, tell me about yourself. And, that's your entree to do the elevator pitch. And, the best advice I can give people when they get that question is not to hear, tell me about yourself. The question you want to hear is, why should I hire you? Because that's really what they're opening up with. So, short and sweet. Who are you? What's your educational background? Make sure you include experience from projects or from work experience that are directly applicable to the job you're applying to. And then, throw in the platitudes. Why are you excited to be talking to that company today? But, anything more than 2 or 3 minutes is going to lose their attention. So short, sweet, and you answer the question, why should I hire you?
Yeah, the elevator pitch. I mean, you have from the bottom floor to the top floor of the building in the elevator to get your message out. So you have to practice doing that in a concise way. And it was so interesting too, because I was staying at the Marriott in Philadelphia downtown, and I was doing work in the lobby. And apparently there was a young guy who was getting interviewed at the time for a position at the hotel at a table that was kind of within earshot. And that was the first question that the manager said was, tell me about yourself. And I heard the response and I was like, oh, he should be listening to this interview right now, because I know Scott is going to have great advice for him.
Yeah.
And
a lot of people use that as an invitation to talk about, well, I love playing Fortnite. I was the social chair in my fraternity, and, all that kind of stuff. It's, that's great. That's color about who you are, but that's really not where you start. That's where you end up.
Yeah, this guy basically could have, easily have said, yeah, I like playing Fortnite or something. And I'm like, no, you didn't answer the question correctly. I don't think he got the job. So I'm hoping that our students are listening to you, because you've got some great advice to share with them. Let's talk about resumes, because obviously that's really what opens the door for the interview. So how can college students build an effective resume?
Yeah, I think the one resource that most people don't even know is there until it's too late is the Career Center on campus. And, the Career Center has, in addition to their expertise, I mean, these are people whose jobs are to get you placed in an employers. And think about this, right? The reason Career Centers exist is because if they get you placed, you're a happy alumni. Happy alumni are happy donors. So, there's definitely an incentive there. But somebody who's a recent graduate, somebody who doesn't have all that much experience, or even is graduating from a master's degree, the Career Center is going to give you a format, a standard template of what a resume should look like. What does that structure look like? And the recent graduate's resume is a pretty vanilla resume in terms of, you'll see professionals, they'll do fancy resumes and, beautiful designs, stuff like that. When you're a recent graduate, in college career centers focus you on what's called the Wharton format. Talking about Philadelphia, Wharton, the business school at UPenn, they pioneered basically this very simple one-page resume that's designed to give you just enough room to express who you are, but not to make it so that it's so different from everybody else's that it's going to feel like they're giving you special treatment. So My advice is, first of all, go to the Career Center, get a sample of the Wharton resume format that they're using. And then the next part of that is really start thinking about what you've done. Start thinking about the value you've added. When an employer is looking at a resume, the question they're going to want to answer is, what are the skills that this person brings that they can use in my organization? And the best thing you can do is demonstrate things that you've done, rather than just listing, here's my job duties and here's the responsibilities, showing the achievements. So, for example, if you're in business and you've been in marketing internships, talk about the type of SEO, SEM projects you've worked on. Talk about the number of social media followers that you've been able to gain. How did you gain those? If you're in technology, maybe you're an engineer, talk about some of the special projects that you've worked on. A mechanical engineer could talk about, some of the products that they've designed. Even if it's just a class project, it's not necessarily something that's going to be used in a product. It's a real world application. And the more of those that you can include, the better. The other thing is that if you've got anything that differentiates you from your academic standpoint, academic or social. So obviously, if you're cum laude, summa cum laude, a lot of people think that it's great to put your fraternity or sorority on there. A lot of fraternities and sororities, they promised a lifetime of brotherhood, this huge network. And yeah, okay, there's parts of that, but most employers are not concerned with that. They don't want to hear about it. They don't want to get the impression that you're a party animal, which is still the public impression of what Greek life is. Mm-hmm. So, I would focus on for folks who are in the Greek life, focus on leadership roles that you've had that are meaningful. Have you been a chapter president? Have you been a delegate to the student government? Have you been involved in scholarship chair? Have you been the community service chair? Outreach, fundraising. I mean, these are things that are absolutely applicable as long as you don't portray it that I'm doing it to buy a kegger. This is really about showing that it's about developing people and developing your organization. Those are some of the advice I would give to building a resume.
I think that's great advice. And just to build on what Scott is talking about, use data. So instead of just saying that you were a member of SIGEP, tell me that you were chapter treasurer and you reduced chapter expenses by 30% as chapter treasurer. I want to talk about that. How did you do that? Because that's going to show me how you're going to save me money as an employer. If you are academic chairman, then tell me your GPA went from, as a chapter, 2.6 to 2.9 and because of certain initiatives that you implemented as academics or scholarship chairman. So those are the kinds of things. Use data and explain to me how you did those things. And then I'm, as an employer, going to figure out how that relates to my business.
And another piece of that too is that a lot of people focus on their technical skills and their, like you go to business school, you work on your undergraduate business degree, and great, you've had 4 years of marketing and finance classes. That's what they teach you, the brass tacks. The piece they don't tell you is influencing, how to influence, how to get people on the same page, how to lead. And I'm speaking as somebody who's got an MBA. They don't really tell you much about what are the specifics behind leadership. It's more of like, here's what you do if you become a leader. So things that demonstrate your ability to influence, to get people on the same page where, you can have authority without, responsibility without authority. The idea being that, maybe I was chapter president. Well, as a chapter president, you've got 40, 60, 80 members. You're trying to get them all on the same page. Trying to get them to save money on their budget. That's no small task. How do you get everybody on the same page of what's your vision in terms of how you do that? What do you build in terms of programming? When I was in college, I was community service chair in my chapter. And, for me, this was a learning experience because I really had never managed. But the other thing that I had done was, it made me get creative. I managed to set records for the number of hours we had in terms of what we contributed. But honestly, the biggest part of that was just showing people what their contribution was, illustrating, here's a chart, here's what we're doing, here's how you did it. And, it was great. I won chairman of the semester from our chapter, and it was something that I did put on my resume, and it helped.
I like that. I like that a lot. Now, obviously, we're operating in this pandemic currently. And, from all the signs that I see so far with school starting up this fall, it seems like COVID is definitely spreading, especially so in youngsters. In the state of Tennessee, I read an article this morning that was talking about 36% of all the COVID cases are actually in youngsters. Uh,
Wow.
and so, it's a really, really big number. So all of that being said, I think that in terms of job interviews, it's very possible that these video interviews are going to continue. So what are some ways that college students can shine on a video interview?
Yeah. By the way, I don't think it's just going to be for COVID. I think it's going to go on beyond. Now, there's the whole question of whether or not remote work is going to continue, but I think that remote interviews are going to be a larger and larger part of that. And I think that, as people become more Zoom savvy, that's going to continue. So my advice to people is a few different things. Number one is manage to find yourself a nice quiet room where you can do an interview. You've got to, even if it means just carving out a closet where you can put clean out the background, make sure there's no junk in there, make sure that you've got good lighting and that you're not going to be interrupted. But the other part of this is you've got to treat it like it's a professional interview, like it's in person in a lot of ways. And that means doing your technology check, make sure there's not going to be any interruption to that. Make sure that if you're on camera, you're wearing a suit. People say, oh, well, Google, I hear that they're pretty casual. You know what? You can always dress down. They can always tell you, hey, it's okay, take the tie off. But you can never say, oh, geez, I'm underdressed, I've got to dress up. Mm-hmm. So, wear the suit, learn how to make good eye contact to the camera, make sure you know where you're looking at, smile. A lot of people forget to smile. They just don't think about that. And be ready. The one other piece of advice I would have is, and by the way, whether this is in person or by Zoom, is have one sheet of basically brain ticklers, stuff that is written down, bullet points that you can very easily reference. You can keep below your field of vision in terms of the camera that you can refer to, because people are going to ask you on these interviews, even an initial video interview, they're going to say, behavioral questions. Tell me about a time when you had this situation. Okay, well, if I've got my tickler there, or if at least I've got my resume in front of me, I can refer to that easily and come up with answers.
Mm-hmm. That's a very typical approach that I see in interviews. Tell me about a time when. So if you know that that's coming, I mean, as somebody who's going to an interview, you're going to get that question. So just have, 3 or 4 stories about unique situations that happened while you were in college, or maybe during an internship or something like that, that you can refer to, and see if you can take any of those 3 or 4 stories and bend it towards what it is that the interviewer is asking you. And so I think that's a great strategy. I really like that a lot. I think that's very helpful.
You've got to be prepared for behavioral interviews. It is the thing.
It is the thing.
And it's all about telling a story, how you overcame adversity.
Right.
Everybody has to be ready for that.
100%. And if you are applying to colleges, that's also a great way to do an essay to apply to your colleges. Talk about some resilience. When did you get knocked down and then get back up? I mean, ultimately, that's what college students and employers really want to know about, because there's going to be times when you are going to fail, where you're going to need to rely on some resiliency because you made a mistake or you just overcame some obstacle. There's tons of obstacles out there in the real world. And I failed a million times, but because of that, I will be successful.
Well, and a lot of things, the real trick with a behavioral interview is that an employer is typically going to give you a difficult situation where you probably screwed up. Yeah. And it's not about how you screwed up. Although if I would suggest that if you give an example, don't give the one where you put the company out of business, but talk about something where, here was the mistake I made. I recognized what the mistake was. Here's how I fixed this situation, and here's what I learned from it and how we were able to come out better on the other end. And that's not an easy thing. People need to practice that story. You need to understand it. And there's an element of self-introspection. Yep. It's, I've been through behavioral interviews from a corporate standpoint. I remember we were interviewing people for, at one company, which shall remain nameless, we were interviewing people for jobs internally for promotion, and we were doing behavioral questions. The question was, tell me about a mistake you made. The person said, here was the mistake I made. We asked, what did you learn? Well, that was not the right approach. What would you do in the future? And he said, well, I'd do the same thing. It's like, why? What did you just, What did you just gain from this?
You have to reflect and think about, the things that have happened and how you would approach them differently. So that way in the future, you're not going to make similar mistakes. And so I do that often. And again, I mean, don't be afraid to make mistakes, especially in college. This is your time to figure out, your leadership style and all of those things. That's why college
And
exists.
boy, do we all make them.
Oh my God, I made a million mistakes. I think we have to normalize that. I think especially now college students are so afraid to make mistakes, but now is the time to really figure this out before you bring a company out of business, right?
Right.
So
Exactly.
I think that's really good. Now, there are a lot of job opportunities right now. I mean, people are hiring all over the place, but at different levels. It could be some that you don't even need a college degree. Obviously that are out there. So, how should students choose between, let's say, two job offers that they get?
Yeah, I think, there's a lot of factors here. And I think everybody comes out of like, and you see this particularly in business people, people that come out of business school, it's all about maximizing your income straight out. And, there's some merit to that, look, because the truth is income compounds. I mean, if you start at X dollars and you get a raise every year at a certain percentage, it's going to grow. But there's, my personal perspective on this is you've got to think about both the short-term and the long-term game, right? So, I think first of all, when you're starting out in your career, and by the way, the beautiful thing about a first job is it's your first job. It doesn't have to be the best job and it doesn't have to be forever, but we all get that first opportunity. And, it's one of those situations where I think you need to take a look at, is this going to get me where I want to be in the long term? You may get a job offer to be an intern at a company you really wanted to work at and doing what you want to do, but the pay is terrible. Or you could go across the street and make more money as a Starbucks barista, right? And it's a very real situation. People do face these scenarios. Well, I've got rent to pay and I've got, student loans and whatever. But the truth of the matter is that that job that may give you a little bit less upfront but it's going to give you the right skills, is going to make you so marketable in a year or two that if you don't get promoted or move forward or get some more development in this job, you're going to have something on your resume with valuable skills that's going to get you where you want to be in terms of the next job. So I think you need to balance that. Now, on the other hand, I'm not a snob. I mean, people have things that they've got to do and they've got to decide. And sometimes you take the money and run. It's an important decision. Like the example is, you got your high school phenom that goes to college, becomes a basketball player and, ends up getting drafted. Guess what? Who am I to tell this person not to take $10 million a year? I mean, obviously it's an extreme example, but I mean, it does happen. Sure. So, you want to evaluate that. But I think the other thing is when we're talking about Gen Z and Gen Z is very much focused on rewarding careers, development, personal enrichment, work-life balance, which that's another topic entirely. I think people put too much faith in work-life balance. It's something that employers offer these days. But, you've got to see what's going to be the best overall package in terms of where you want to be. And make an educated decision. And my advice to you is, if you don't know, if you're looking at these two offers and you're just slack-jawed because you're not sure what to do, talk to somebody who's been out there for a while. It doesn't have to necessarily be the same field, but talk through them, go through the pros, go through the cons, get their opinion in terms of what would they do in that situation. Not saying you have to take their advice, but we've all been there. And, we've been in situations where you've gotten a great job offer, you've gotten a terrible job offer. What do you do? Sometimes the terrible job offer is the better one in disguise.
Mm-hmm. I also think one other thing that's important to Gen Z, since we're talking about Gen Z, is really the values of the organization. I think is really important. And sometimes you get into a situation where the employer doesn't necessarily share your own values for whatever reason. And this becomes a problem for Gen Z. It's been a problem for me personally in the past. And sometimes you got to walk away from an opportunity because the values are just not they're not in alignment. And so I think for Gen Z, that's another thing for them to explore, is look at the values of the organization and be sure that it's all in alignment.
Yeah, and one of the biggest themes that we hear today, I don't know if you've ever heard the term ESG. It's environmental, social, and governance. And basically it's everything all in one. It kind of covers that values piece.
Right.
And companies, boards of directors, CEOs, they're focused more and more on this ESG piece. The idea that you're going to be a good corporate citizen, that you're going to give people opportunities to grow and develop, and you're going to do it in a meaningful and positive way. And everybody takes a different approach. I've worked at companies where it's all about the quality of life. I've worked at other companies where it's like, hey, I don't care what you've got going on in your personal life. You're bleeding to death, put a Band-Aid on it, get to work, and let's go. Mm-hmm. So, you've got to decide what's there. The beautiful thing about this world is everybody has their own values and the way that they want to work and the way they want to do things. But what is important to keep in mind is that everything has trade-offs. Right. Everything has trade-offs. I'm based in South Florida, and we have a company that, was known as a best-in-class employer to work, publicly traded organization. They eventually changed ownership group, and they've still got a lot of elements of that, but now it's more, your private equity. Guess what? Your priorities change. So the company you join today may not necessarily be the same company you join, 6 months from now when you're still with the organization. But yeah, the truth of the matter is you've got to wake up in the morning and be able to look at yourself in the mirror and make sure that you're happy with what you're doing. Right. A lot of people say life is short, and in some ways it is. But in a lot of ways, life is really, really long. We've got 40, 45, 50 years of work ahead of us. So, unless we hit the lottery or we do very well or we manage to retire or whatever the case may be, you've got to work on, getting what you can. And by the way, let's say you pick wrong, you pick that really bad opportunity and you're at a place that really stinks. You know what? Take the skills you can from that in as short a period as time as you can and use that to leverage it to get to the next opportunity.
Yeah. All right, so let's use that example. Let's assume for a moment that you're at a place that really stinks. You want to change careers because you're like, this isn't for me, but you don't really know what it is that you want to do. So what are the next steps?
Yeah, well, that's a much larger conversation. And I think that, that's when a conversation with someone who's a good, vocational counselor is probably effective. Somebody who has a doctorate or or some sort of advanced degree in social work who can kind of help you work through that. They do, surveys, and they do, Q&A and other ways to get you to that standpoint. But I think the other part of that, quite honestly, is, you come out of school, 20, 21 years old. I don't know about you, but when I got out, I knew of probably about a small sliver of the types of career opportunities that were out there. Today, I know exactly. I was looking at about a 10% sample size versus what's out there. So, the other part of this is, quite truthfully, is take some chances, try different job opportunities, try different positions. You know what? You may not have, you may have gone to school as an engineer and you got that degree in engineering, but you see, you're bored with the job, you hate the stuff that you're doing. And guess what? You see that there's a sales opportunity and they want someone who's got a technical background. You know what? The worst thing you have to lose is trying it out and seeing if it's a good match for you.
Mm-hmm. That's where I think small companies have a little bit of an advantage over the big behemoths that are out there. Typically in smaller companies, you'll get exposure to a lot of different things. And then from that experience, maybe shadowing other employees and things like that, you get experience in a lot of different areas, and then you can figure out what's the best fit for you. So if you are a small company, I think that's where you might have an advantage.
It depends, though, because a lot of companies that are larger, they have the opportunity to move people around and to try different things. I'll give you an example. Starbucks is one of the organizations that I think is really cool about this. I've got a lot of clients I work with from Starbucks, and one of the things that they have there is they have what's called TLAs, time limited assignments. And I've seen people move from operations into HR for a 6-month job. I've seen people move from HR into marketing. I've seen people move from all these different disciplines. And the expectation is, you know what, you try it, you make your impact, you go back to your regular job and you try something else. So, I think it really depends on the organization and the culture. Sometimes if you're with a small company, that growth can be limited too, because there's just less room for you to maneuver.
Yeah. That's good. That's really good points. I like that example with Starbucks. That's excellent. And you're the president of Insider Career Strategies. What are 3 reasons that somebody should hire you for, let's say, resume, LinkedIn profile, maybe their bio, or just career coaching?
Yeah, I think the strongest value proposition is I bring from the other side of the table, which is the recruiting standpoint, and I'm constantly working to see what's going on in the hiring trends and to see what's going on there. So, I work with a variety of people from a variety of disciplines, and basically, it's I think what I bring to the table is the ability to kind of balance between the soft side of it, which is how do you deal with the people, and how do you interview, and how do you negotiate with folks and get what you need, the networking with the technical piece of this, because the truth of the matter is that this has become a very technical process in a lot of ways. So I think when you balance that with the experience of having been on the other side of that, I think that's the value that I bring to my clients, I believe.
I love it. That's really, really good. Now, we do love good food here at Fraternity Foodie, and there are many, many good food choices where you live in the Miami, Fort Lauderdale area.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you could eat for days and days and days. So what is your go-to restaurant in that area?
Boy, the thing about it is we have such variety that, the South Florida market's great. There's no shortage of places. No, I'm serious. I think, like, for example, in town, there's a fantastic little Thai restaurant, but, I love diversity of food. So, I love the fact that you can go into Little Havana and get one of, a truly authentic Cuban meal. I love going down to South Beach, going to Joe's Stone Crab, although that'll put you out a lot of money to get, from that standpoint. So, again, I don't really have a single place. I love the food scene. I love trying new places all the time. So, a little bit of everything.
That sounds good. It sounds like you have a lot of fun in that area.
Although I will say, actually, you know what? I do have one specific recommendation.
All right.
I am Jewish. I love Jewish delis, and we've got no shortage of them, thank God. I mean, it's a dying breed, the Jewish deli, where you've got the salamis hanging up on the ceiling, and cranky waitresses giving you your food. They slice the food. There's a city in South Florida called Hialeah, and Hialeah it's west of Miami. You ever heard of Hialeah?
Of course.
Yeah, I mean, it's where basically, where Cuban and Central American immigrants come to move there. So it's a very Latin city, but the city has changed over the years. It used to be Jewish and other demographics. And right in Hialeah, there's a restaurant called Stephen's Delicatessen. And Stephen's, it's a place, the menu's changed a little bit, but I mean, it's got the classical deli stuff. They cook their own pastrami and their corned beef, they'll hand slice it for the sandwiches, but they'll also do like Cuban egg rolls and other stuff for you too. So it's a little bit of everything. It's a fun place.
I love it. The Israeli in me is very happy that you went that route, because I'm going to be speaking in northern Jersey and the New York City area in a couple of weeks. And that's exactly where I'm going. I'm going to the New York City Kosher Deli, and we're going to have the pastrami hanging off the side of the sandwich. It's going to be fantastic.
Yeah, we actually have some Israeli restaurants where we are too. Fantastic stuff.
Yeah, it's really, really good. All that Mediterranean food is fantastic. The Jewish deli, I mean, all of that is something that I really miss. Living in Nashville, as you can imagine, I don't get a lot of that.
Nashville's nice, though. You got the country music scene, and you got a lot of celebrities around.
You better like barbecue, because that's what you're getting.
Yeah.
So anyway, so that's really good. All right. So if our listeners, if they want to use your services for resume building or career coaching, where should they go to get some more information and to connect with you?
They can find my website, www.insidercareerstrategies.com. That's probably the easiest way. They can also email me at scott.singer@insidercs, C as in Charlie, S as in Sam.com.
That's perfect. Well, thank you so much, Scott. This has been a lot of help for our audience members, because again, I mean, this is really what they want to focus on. This is what they want to talk about. So this has been some great nuggets in here. I hope everyone listens to it. I hope they go back and just make sure they take notes and then forward it to other college students on campus and other recent graduates that could use some career help, maybe some resume building. All of that, Scott is your go-to person. So I really appreciate you taking the time with us today.
Thank you. And if anybody would like a free resume review, please feel free to email me.
Boom. There you go. I mean, listen, you're going to get a lot of emails now, so be careful.
Happy to do it.
That's great. All right. Well, thank you so much, Scott. And to our listeners, thank you so much for listening. We hope to see you on another episode of Fraternity Foodie. Thanks so much.
Thanks,
and we'll see you next time.